This idea of remembrance, I would say, is central to the human vocation. It's central to what it means from a spirit, what Islamic spirituality is. And the laws and the rituals are there precisely to facilitate this kind of remembrance. Now, for people who are Sufis, for people who are Sufi mystics, Sufis took this concept of dhikr very seriously. For them, it's really, they make it a very central point of their understanding of what it means to be a Muslim. I don't think we've heard too much about Sufism, but Sufism is a mystical perspective in Islam. It's not a sect, a separate sect or group in Islam, but a group of people who practice Islam and try to not only do the things, if they're real Sufis, not only do the sort of things that are required, but do additional kinds of things as well. And those additional things are all structured for this idea of remembrance. So Sufis say, for example, that if you do any of the ritual obligations that you're supposed to do as a Muslim, and you don't actually remember God as a result of them, or you don't remember God while you're doing them, then in fact you might as well not have done them, right? And so really taking this to kind of its logical conclusion. And there's a story that they tell, funny story that they tell, about it was the time for Friday prayers, right? You all went to Friday prayers yesterday. It's the time for Friday prayers, and so everyone's supposed to be coming to prayer. Everyone's going into the mosque, and there's some guy laying outside in the courtyard, just apparently sunning himself, taking a nap in the sun and looking very relaxed. And so as one of the men walks into the mosque, he sees this guy, and he kicks him, and he says, you lazy bum, get up, it's time for the prayer, it's time, get in there, or it's time for the prayer. And the man says, leave me alone, right? And so the guy goes in, and the prayer happens. He comes back out, and he sees the guy still laying there. He hasn't moved, right? And the man says to him, I can't believe it. The whole prayer went by, the sermon, everything, and you just sat here laying on the ground. And the guy laying on the ground says to him, well, that might be true. But the whole time you were in there, in the prayer, you were thinking about how much money you were going to sell your rice for in the bazaar when you went back to your shop. And the whole time I was laying here, I was doing nothing but remembering God, right? Now that's not an acceptable Muslim attitude. You can't say, I'm not going to go to the Friday prayer because I want to lay outside and remember God while lying on my side. That's not acceptable from an Islamic point of view. But it's a story told to make a point. Right? To make this point that if you're going to go and do these things and you're not really going to focus on what you're supposed to be doing, then there's no point in doing them at all. So this was important for Sufis, but Sufis also took this idea of dhikr, which, just to make it clear to you that Arabic never means one thing, dhikr also can mean to mention or to invoke. And so Sufis would sometimes do additional practices that were oriented around this idea of dhikr or of invoking. So, for example, there is a hadith of the Prophet in Bukhari, I think it's in Bukhari or Muslim, which says that after your daily prayers, after your morning prayer, your Fajr prayer, if you pray right at dawn, that you should then remember God until the rising of the sun. Right? It's the time, for those of you who don't get up and do this, I never knew about this when I was a Muslim, there's a difference between dawn and sunrise. Dawn is much earlier, about an hour and a half earlier than sunrise. And so a Muslim who would get up and pray the dawn prayer, which is the shortest of all the prayers, it says, then remember God until the sun rises. And again, with a word related to this idea of dhikr. So a lot of Sufis take this to mean that they should sit after the prayer in the morning and do various kinds of remembering of God. And so sometimes, or invoking of God. And this takes different forms for different Sufi groups. It might mean that they'll sit and read the Quran. It might mean that they'll sit and repeat certain names of God or repeat certain pious formulas or so on, right? So they take that very seriously, this idea of dhikr as being central to their faith.